Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the first of many interviews in the For Love of Art interview series from Legion Paper, hosted by Michael Ginsburg, Legion's co-founder. The series invites artisans from all corners of the fine art world to learn about their craft, the importance of paper, and essentially what makes them tick. My name is Mark Shotland, and I'll be your moderator. Throughout the interview, we will invite you to post your questions into the chat window just off to your right. I'll do my best to curate those and to interrupt the conversation with Wendy and Michael to have your questions answered. Occasionally, if you find that your screen freezes up, just either hit the refresh button or there's a connect button at the top of your screen. That usually does a trick. We'll be recording this, so I'll be sending out a replay link sometime tomorrow with a recording of this so you can watch it on your own time. Michael Ginsburg, who's in the center of your screen, began his career in 1964 in the sample department at Crestwood Paper. In the 1970s, Michael concentrated his efforts to expand the availability of fine art papers in the United States by introducing new papers from around the world, which are considered landmark brands to this day, such as Somerset, Stonehenge, Coventry Rag, and Revere. Those are all created by Michael. In 1994, Michael, with partner Len Levine, formed Legion Paper with the objective to become the largest importer and distributor of fine art papers in North America. Michael continues to source and create new papers for an ever-changing market. Michael's guest today is Wendy Hollender. Very excited to have you on. She's a botanical artist, illustrator, author, and instructor. Wendy's illustrations have been published in the New York Times, O, the Oprah Magazine, Real Simple, Good Housekeeping, and Martha Stewart Living, just to name a few. Wendy is considered one of the world's leading experts in using color pencils and watercolor pencils to create detailed botanical drawings and paintings. And now I pass it on to you, Michael and Wendy.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And thank you for setting this up. I really, really appreciate it. Before I introduce Wendy, I just want to say this. This is not only going to be about artists. We're going to talk about, we're going to be talking to printers, silkscreen printers, intaglio and etching printers, letterpress printers, lithographers. We'll talk to photographers. We'll talk to alternative photography, some platinum, palladium printers as well. We'll talk to fine art framers. We're going to talk to bookbinders. It's going to be interesting, I hope, and I think it's going to be informative, and I'm excited about it. I mean, it's the first. This is the first of a series that is probably going to go on for months. So let's get started. I have to introduce this young lady.
Relative.
A lovely lady who's so talented, so incredibly talented, and has picked a medium, or has picked a subject matter that is so detailed, as a watercolorist or as a colored pencil artist, so detailed and so intricate, it almost looks like a photograph. And I'll say this to Wendy, and Wendy, you can come up on the screen, Mark. With portraits, animals, landscapes, why botanicals? I mean, it's so detailed and so intricate. Why did you pick botanical art?
Well, first of all, I didn't know how to draw. I was an artist and a textile designer. I loved color and I loved pattern, and I could use splashy watercolor. And when I grew up, my mom loved her garden and loved flowers, and so did I. And I wanted to try to paint those flowers. And I tried, but they didn't look realistic. But I ended up going to Fine Art College, Rhode Island School of Design.
Wow.
I studied art, but guess what? If you didn't know how to draw already, they didn't teach you.
Really?
So, yeah. So I never really learned that realism key, though I longed to learn it. But I became a textile designer, and I used old botanical prints and documents as reference. And they were flat, or a photograph. So I could kind of copy that. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to work from real nature because I love live living things. And I wanted to pick my own flowers, for example, and draw them. And I studied at the New York Botanical Garden, and it literally transformed my work overnight, learning these techniques that were actually something that you could learn. You know, I had always thought if you weren't born with that talent, you couldn't do it. And I learned that that wasn't true.
So were you able to draw a straight line? No.
You know, a straight line, you use a ruler, not a problem.
Ah, very true.
It's the curves, that's the hard
Yeah.
part.
So you have done a lot. I mean, even authored a book, a very popular book that anybody that wants to be a botanical artist should actually read this book, without a doubt. You want to tell me about how you got started on the book?
Well, this is actually my fourth book.
Wow.
The first book I did was a self-published kind of workbook for my students, because after studying at the New York Botanical Garden, they asked me to teach, and they particularly asked me to teach colored pencil, which really hadn't been used that much for botanical art, if at all. And I really took to it.
What would they use? What would they use?
Watercolor. It's mostly watercolor, a lot of dry brush watercolor, painstaking techniques. But they taught you how to draw first. And when I learned how to draw, for me, the relationship with my pencil hitting a piece of paper and the friction that's created, and that really, I loved learning that and figuring that out. And so once I learned how to draw, I loved that so much that I started using color pencils, because you're still drawing with color pencil. And yeah, so that's how I got started. I can't remember what the question was.
Well, the question is why. Let's talk about the book.
Okay. So anyway, so the first book was, they asked me to teach specifically color pencil and for botanical artists. And I took those lessons, which I really enjoyed creating. I found that teaching is as much a creative undertaking as creating art, and the visuals that I would create to help my students understand the concepts, I really liked those. So I turned that into a workbook at first for students. And then Faber-Castell, the pencil company, I used their pencils. And when I created this workbook, I contacted them to let them know I loved their pencils and I was using them in my workbook. And I sent them a copy, and then they invited me to one of their conventions, someplace, maybe it was even Las Vegas, to demonstrate techniques during this convention of all the art supply suppliers and the book retailers all go there. And while there, Random House came and saw my workbook, and they gave me my first full-length book after that.
Is that your pencil of choice, Wendy?
It sure is. I mean, for color,
there's so many. I mean, there's so many.
yeah, no. For color pencils, I use those. For graphite pencils, I like a different brand.
So this is a good segue, because any good artist has to put their art down on a good substrate. And I think you came to me and said, Michael, I need a paper that's going to work for my art. And we know in the art of watercolor, it's a very subjective medium. I mean, everybody's hand is not Wendy Hollender's hand. I mean, everybody's different. Their style is different, and their requirements are different. So you came to me, and I sampled you with a whole bunch of samples. And the paper you finally picked, which was at the top of the heap, was Stonehenge Aqua.
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Well, actually, you know what? I can show you why. Would you like me to show you why?
Sure. But I like it. Give some quality reasons as to why the surface works well for you. That's important.
Well, first of all, I like a hot pressed watercolor paper, which is a smooth paper relative to watercolor paper. Other watercolor papers, such as cold press, are much bumpier. But for the work I do, I want to be able to use some watercolor. So you need to have a paper that will absorb the watercolor and not buckle too much. But then I want to go back in with very, very sharp colored pencils on top. And so I don't want a rough surface, because that will dull my point right away. Right. So it needs to be relatively smooth, but have the ability to take many, many, many layers, because I put probably 50, 60 layers of pencil on top. and then it has to blend together well. And I found that Stonehenge Aqua is kind of the sweet spot for me because it has it's not perfectly smooth.
It's not glass. It's not glass.
I was going to say it's not an ice skating rink,
Right.
but and it's not really rough. Others hot press papers have so much tooth to them that you have to layer a long time to get rid of that texture if that's what you want. Whereas Stonehenge Aqua, I found, allowed me to create the rich color and the detail and the contrast much quicker. And so I love that idea. It like takes me, I mean, I think I work twice as fast now, and I work really, it's a slow process. So Stonehenge Aqua worked really well for me, and I didn't even know it at first, but I realized, gosh, I'm working so much faster now. And then I went back and tried some of the other papers, and I realized it was for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, it is a smooth sheet. I mean, without a doubt. Pardon me. So what do you, given what we're all living through now, Wendy, with the pandemic, what are you working on? What are you presently doing?
Well, I'm doing in my own work, I'm just kind of documenting the season as it progresses. And I've been going around, and I have some slides that I can show of, what's been blooming in my garden here. I'm fortunate to live out of the city.
You live on a farm.
I live at a small farm 2 hours north of Manhattan. I moved here in the Hudson Valley. I moved here 11 years ago.
Wow.
And originally it was going to be part-time. I needed a place where I could have my own plants growing.
Right.
I just felt that need. And once I got here, I never wanted to go back. So I moved completely out of Manhattan within, 6 months of moving here.
Wow.
And I just love it here. And I love how I can just watch the plants grow and document that. So
So this is a perfect situation for you. I mean, given the horrible situation we're in, it's a perfect situation for you to work from home and to do workshops, which is...
Well, right. That's the other component to that was, so my new book that came out, so this was also from Random House in April, I thought, is this a good time or a bad time for a book? But as it turned out, the book was released and I started to do these online Zoom workshops to replace, my in-person workshops. I already, to be fair, had an online instructional subscription program that people could go to. So I was already set up doing video and, lessons so that people had an idea. And I was doing these webinars to give group critiques of student work. But
Right.
then the pandemic hit and we moved into Zoom right away. And it was amazingly powerful. Like it's really been like the workshops, the minute we announce them, they normally sell out right away. And we keep doing them, and people just want more and more, and they talk of it sort of being their lifeline in this time. And you actually really feel, just like I feel like you and I are really having a conversation and getting to know each other. It's like that in the Zoom workshop too, with the added advantage that they can see me demonstrate so well.
Wow. Are you working with beginners as well, Wendy?
Yes, we have all levels of student work in the same group. I mean, I have students who studied with me for 12 years who come every time they can because they just like to be part of the group. It keeps them motivated.
Right.
They love to see what other people are doing. And then we get real beginners who've, literally never touched, never thought they could draw before.
So let's talk about what's behind you, because what's behind you is tomato, and that's on hot press aqua, right?
No, that is.
Oh, that's a digital
print. So look, let's start. So this, okay. Well, you see right here.
Yes.
This is an original on Stonehenge craft paper.
Right.
And then
craft color. Craft color.
Yeah, and then I do a print. I have my own big digital printer here to do fine art prints. So I love doing my work life size, small, but then I like to blow it up big. And these kinds of big works get used in galleries, restaurants, places like that, so that I want people to really get to enjoy that tomato.
Wendy, is that digitally generated on the actual craft paper?
I use an Epson 7000 series
Right.
printer. So what I do is I do the original art, and that has all the detail I want. And then I do a very high level, a very high resolution scan.
Right.
And then I put the scan in Photoshop and I do my color correcting there. Like the hardest thing was getting my craft paper to match my print because I really wanted to get that paper. It looks pretty good, right?
Yeah, it looks great.
So I do some work there to get the colors back to how I want them to appear. And then I can print it really, really large. I first learned that when I was asked to do an exhibit for the U.S. Botanic Garden about 5 years ago. And they said, we can't show your originals, but we want to take your work and blow it up big, and we're going to print it. And I thought, how is that going to work? Because most of the time in illustration, for example, you reduce work and it looks really good, but you never enlarge it because it gets kind of pixelated.
Right.
But somehow I found that my work, I think because I put a lot of detail and clean edges, things like that, blows up beautifully. And so that got me doing these really large prints.
So let me give you a short story about craft. I'll give you the abridged story. It happened about 6 years ago, I think, maybe 7 years ago. I don't know how long. I think craft is in the market. My craft Stonehenge has been in the market about 7 years. So it's been in the market about 7 years.
No, but I used craft paper like 25 years ago. You had it.
Not the Stonehenge craft.
Oh, it was different.
Yeah. So here's what happened. So a couple of artists came to me and said, Michael, do you have craft wrapping paper? I said, why? Why do you want craft wrapping paper? He said, well, we want to do some art on it. I said, you want to do your art on craft wrapping paper? I said, you're not going to do that. Your art will destroy itself in a month. It'll turn yellow, it'll fall apart. I said, well, how can you help us? I said, well, I'll tell you what. How about a supermarket shopping bag color? Would that work for you? And they said, you can do that for me? I said, I can try. Making paper to a specification, just be quick about this, is not an easy thing to do.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it requires trials and it requires color changes on the machine. So lo and behold, we went to my mill. I went to my mill. We had trials in the middle of the night, literally in the middle of the night. And we changed color and we finally came up with a color that worked. It was craft. Here's the kicker. It was 100% cotton. It was not going to turn yellow. It was totally archival, and the market could not have been more pleased. So enter Stonehenge craft color.
So did you had Stonehenge though in other colors before that, but not the craft like
Yes.
this?
Correct. Yes.
That's because I used to use your Stonehenge paper in like your gray and other colors.
Gray and fawn, right.
Yeah.
Right. You're probably confusing it with fawn, maybe with fawn.
I'll show you. I have it on my screen for you later on.
So why don't you show us some of your some of your other images?
Okay, great. I'll do a quick little bit of a slideshow here. Okay.
As you're setting that up, Wendy, I just want to remind everybody in the offers tab on the right-hand side, just below where it says chat, you can see the link to Wendy's book. She's offering 10% off for everybody on this webinar today. So click on that and it'll take you over to that link.
Great. So again, Michael, I just want to thank you for having me today. I'm really honored to be your first in this series, which I'm going to really enjoy coming to all of them. But here's some of my work on your Stonehenge Aqua hot pressed watercolor paper. And you can see how I work here. Starting on the left, you can see my watercolor dabs to test my colors. And then I test my color pencils on top of that, trying to really match the colors that I see in nature. And then I start doing the drawing. And I'm also just in love with the plants and what they're used for and how they grow. And so I put all kinds of notes in my drawings often that I find just interesting. And I just kind of like the way the text looks on the paper as well. It allows me to feel not so worried about making a perfect drawing, just really enjoying the process of studying that plant and the process of drawing at the same time.
Now, how long does a piece like this take, Wendy?
This was a while. This would have been about maybe 3 weeks.
Wow.
Just because maybe not quite 3 weeks of solid work, maybe 2 weeks.
And it comes to a point where you say it's done, right?
Yes, sometimes the plant dies and it's done for that reason, or sometimes I walk away and come back and say, good enough. I get the idea. Often I don't finish my drawings because I like them. I like to show the process. So
how many pieces can you be working on at the same time?
Oh, many.
Really?
I've got because I document the plants throughout the season. So I'm going to show you in a few minutes here. You'll see some things that will answer that question. But here you can just see when I was testing new papers, when I found you, Michael, these were all my tests I was doing to figure out what paper I was going to use.
Wow.
And so I did a bunch of different tests on different papers.
Right.
I really liked the Stonehenge Aqua. The reason I liked it, you can see my notes right here. I liked my colors felt bright and vibrant.
Right.
I could get really good darks, could get the fine details, sharp edges, clean edges. And you know what? I could erase it a little bit.
Wow.
I was careful.
Wow.
So that had all the things I needed in a paper. And
wow.
then you can see here a couple of my pieces, all on your Stonehenge Aqua. On the left, maybe that's pears growing in my garden. And so I might have started this in the fall and I would have done the pears first. And I would, of course, had to cut one open, not only to draw it, but then, of course, to eat it afterwards. And then I went back the next spring and added the flower in, so I leave places for that. Wow. And then the fruit on the right called her soursop. This was done in Hawaii where I go every year to work. And this is more like my process pages where I do a lot of detailed work, but I like to put my investigation and my notes and other things on the page as well to invite the viewer to kind of study it a little bit and, to learn as they're
the detail is unbelievable detail.
It's a lot of fun. I even show you how to make a smoothie if you read closely on this.
Wow, really? Wow.
And then, as I mentioned before, I really like to make prints as well and blow them up big. And this is a client's dining room that had bought. They were really interested in, these are all tropical plants. There's chocolate, fig, avocado, coffee, Meyer lemon, etc. And so that's a fun thing for me to do also, because not everybody really can afford an original, but the prints are really a great way to, get a bunch of these at once.
Wow.
And then this is the cover of my new book, which came out in April. And I'm pretty happy with how it came out. And the reason I kind of wanted to do this new book, I wanted it to be a little bit different than the previous books that I've done and that other people have done, because I really kind of wanted to take the art of botanical illustration and make it something that was accessible for most people, for anybody actually, right, who wants to kind of give it a try, because it's a great way to be immersed in art and nature together, and just to be involved in that process is really a wonderful thing. One thing I try to do is I keep my art supplies very simple. This is my setup here. I have this set up in my studio. I also have it packed in a backpack for easy on-the-go drawing as well. I have a set of color pencils. I use watercolor pencils because they're very transportable. I mix on a palette, and I have my live plant, a good pencil sharpener, good source of light. That's kind of it, So it's not a big deal to set up and clean up after.
All right.
And then what I teach in the book, starting with very basic skills and build on those slowly so that you learn these basic idea of simple geometric shapes with a good light source and then how to translate those into the more complex forms in nature that you can see below each one of those geometric shapes.
Right. Incredible.
And then here is the idea. My technique is, it starts with a good drawing and understanding the surface and how it bends around a real, a round form. And I do that with just neutral tones at first to describe the form. And then I start to layer watercolor washes and color on top. And so this is sort of the step-by-step that the whole book is set up like this, kind of like a cookbook with, the steps you go through and your ingredients on the left side.
Right. Wendy, did you ever think of working larger? Larger than, I know I know your prints are large, but you ever think of
I actually started out, my first paintings after I studied botanical art were I blew up my sketchbook pages and did them in oil paint on large canvases.
Wow.
And I liked them, but I couldn't get the same kind of detail as I can with the pencil. So, I'll work on a full sheet of 22 by 30-inch paper, and sometimes I'll draw something blown up, 5 or 6 times larger, so I will do that. But I like to do it with the watercolor and color pencil, just because I can control it so much better. And also it keeps me close to my plant, because I like to have that relationship with the real plant at all times. And so having simple materials makes that easier to accomplish.
Right.
And so then in the book, once I've taught the basics and you kind of learn how to draw the realistic form, then we go into more detail on using color, which is really fun to make the form look realistic and colorful, but also still very three-dimensional and descriptive to the plant. And then this shows you a little bit about flowers and how trying to understand flowers first, which are so difficult and complex, as simple shapes, and various kinds of flowers fit into groups. Once you understand what a tubular flower looks like, it's much easier to draw that flower and then another flower that's similar. So I break it down that way.
Wendy, Gloria has a question about the previous slide, I think.
Sure.
She wanted to know about the process of creating gloss and highlights on objects with color pencil.
Okay, that's a great question, Gloria. Creating that highlight is something that starts right at the beginning. So you leave an area where you figure out what your light source is going to be, and the light from in these drawings is coming from the left side, kind of coming down in front of the form at about a 45-degree angle, so that there's a clear shadow side on the right, and then the highlight is in the upper left. And so I know that right from the start, and I leave that white, empty color of the paper first. And then I start to slowly build up the values from light to dark, and then the color goes on top of that, always knowing that that little area that's going to be the highlight, there has to be certain amount of the paper showing through, but it has to sparkle. It can't just look like an empty hole. So I slowly fill that area in a little bit, but never completely. And that's sort of how I create that. And then I also leave what's called a reflective highlight often on on the shadow side to create that feeling of light bouncing off the surface. And I have a whole section in the book that goes in a lot of detail on how to create the highlight, the shadows, the reflective highlights.
Wow. So it's really a teaching manual. I mean, your book is
yeah, it's kind of like a cookbook in a way. I broke it down into small, digestible lessons that build on each other. So you can sort of learn one thing, and then once you feel comfortable with that, you can move on to the next, And then another really cool thing about botanical art, especially in this time of the pandemic, is that I realized I always knew when I would do my work, it would relax me and I would feel so good. And my students talked about that as well. And I was recently discussing my new book with a psychotherapist, and she said, you know, it sounds very much like a technique we use in psychotherapy to relieve stress and anxiety,
Wow.
which is engaging all five senses and thinking about each, you know, engaging each sense. And I realized that that's what botanical drawing does naturally. And so it's one thing that I stress in the book, just because I've always felt that way about it. So I think it's really helpful now, because you can use it as your daily meditation or as a way to relax.
100%, right.
Yeah. So in the pre-pandemic, this is what a workshop looked like. I'd be demonstrating, let's say, and everybody would be gathered around, and you could see the real plants are everywhere. And then everybody's sort of drawing together. But now, and it used to be, this is on my farm, I have a dedicated pavilion you can see in the background. That's where the workshops are held. And this is how we used to do it. And hopefully one day we will do this again soon.
But you with the online workshop, you're not limiting your participation at all, or are you?
Right. You can, you know, anybody, I get students that come from all over the world to take those, you know, and the only thing that stops people sometimes is the time. You know, Australia has been asking, can you please change the time? Because when, you know, I don't want to get up at 4 a.m.
I know.
But we also record the sessions, and we offer some of them as videos that you can then just get for the video lesson without the class.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what my studio looks like nowadays. This is during a Zoom workshop. This one was when we were doing spring flowers, daffodils, and tulips. And so I'm set up. I have a camera there, so I'm filming. I have my computer where I'm looking at everybody on the screen, and we can communicate. And then, of course, I always have the live plants all around that we're drawing.
Right.
And it works really well. I mean, I was really surprised by that, at how well it can work. And so here you can see, this is what I've been working around on recently. Typically, I do most of my botanical work on a white background, but I've been lately obsessed with this craft paper. I've always loved the background, the way it has this antique-y look to it, and it makes me think about things a little bit differently. So I did some samples, the same plant on white paper and on craft, just to kind of compare them and to see how it feels working both ways. And then I just decided during the pandemic that, well, you know what, let me do my drawings for now all on craft paper. So
yeah, the images pop, Wendy. I mean, they on the craft.
They really do, because you've got that mid background and you can go lighter and darker.
Yeah.
So I've been having a lot of fun, and here I'm going to show you. But before we go, that was the Stonehenge paper when I was a textile designer.
Wow.
So I was using your papers back then, and this is what my work looked like.
That's fawn.
Right?
It's fawn Stonehenge.
All right. And then here is another one, just to give you an idea of how I love that paper, that craft paper color, even back then, because I didn't have to, if you used white paper and you had to do a background like this, you had to paint that whole background. Whereas if you could work on colored paper. So I used to do this kind of work with gouache, which is like a thick watercolor paper. But then this is what I've been doing. So starting, in March when I got back, here I did the crocus and daffodil, and I just, explore the plants, do whatever I want. I love the way they would look on the craft paper. And that would give me the ability, especially with the roots, to do them in white. And also to leave to put my highlights in, not have to make sure I leave the paper white. That's really one fun thing about it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And then here, so you can see here, this is the magnolia, and I haven't even finished the one on the right because I was waiting. I'm going to put the seed pods in. But sadly, up here this year, the magnolias bloomed. I did my drawing, and then we had a snowstorm, and the flowers just all dried up and died on the trees, and there are no seed pods this year. So I can't decide if I want to ask somebody down in New York City to cut one of their seed pods off of a magnolia tree that maybe didn't get ruined, in the frost, or if I should just wait or just draw the dead flowers, because that's how it is now up here.
So, continue.
Oh, no. Okay. If you have a question, go ahead.
No, it's not a question. It was about another color of paper then, but continue.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions that people are asking about the watercolor pencils that you use.
Okay. I use they're also made by Faber-Castell. They're called Albrecht Dürer. And they're the same colors as the Faber-Castell Polychromos, which are the colored pencils that are oil-based that I use. And I really like to use watercolor pencils rather than regular watercolor, mainly for convenience, because I have this very cool little palette that you can draw on with the watercolor pencil, and then you take your paintbrush with water and you can mix all your colors right there. So I don't have to have tubes of paint or a whole palette, all that you normally have with watercolor. And even here on the craft paper, I'm using the watercolor pencils just as I described, as well as the color pencils. So another thing I like to do is go out in the woods and find wildflowers and wild mushrooms, things like that, to draw as the season develops. So I've had time because I'm not going anywhere. I have more time to do this, which is, one of the benefits. And then,
look at the contrast on that piece. That is unbelievable, Wendy.
Well, that was fun. And what I love about these parrot tulips is I actually grew these, which was so much fun. I was in October coming back from Greece. I had taught a workshop there, and we flew through Amsterdam, and in the airport, I picked up a couple of bags of tulip bulbs. And so these are some of those. So it's been fun to be able to actually get the chance and have the time to draw them. And
is it more challenging to work on the color craft than it is to work on the white, or is it? There's not a difference at all. I mean,
well, it's different. Your mind has to think about it differently, and I like that. It's a little bit of a brain teaser for me. They both work well, and it takes some getting used to the differences. I wouldn't say one is easier than the other. It's just different.
I mean, to your point earlier about layering, I mean, we've been told by so many colored pencil artists, members of the Colored Pencil Society for one, that layering with Stonehenge has been phenomenal. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. It just takes layers on top of layers on top of layers.
Right. You can do a lot of layering. And the thing is, I don't use wax-based pencils. Those are Prismacolor, which is what a lot of people are familiar with. With those, you can only put a certain amount of layers on, and then the paper gets saturated and waxy. I haven't figured out, I can always go further. You know what I mean? You think I can't go any further, but actually you come back. I think what happens, Michael, maybe to me, it feels like you do a drawing, you think you've gotten as dark as you can. You come back the next day and realize, wait, I still need to get darker. And then you couldn't the paper didn't take it the day before, but now it will saturate more. Is that true?
What you're doing is you're building a layer on and you're putting a layer on top of a layer. It's almost like when you're printing, you put down a base coat, and then you print over the base coat. So you have more intensity of the color of that, the color you want. So you're literally putting a layer down first in your first application.
Yeah. So it just feels like you can always go further than you think.
Get deeper. Yeah, get deeper in deeper in color. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And then these are the most recent. These are blooming right now. These are the daylilies. Not quite finished, but sort of the idea of it. So I'm having a lot of fun with this craft paper.
The craft paper is actually darker than that. I mean, that's a little bit.
sometimes my scan, comes out a little lighter, so that it's hard to get a good scan or photograph on craft paper. That I know for sure.
Right.
And so what I've had to do is figure out after in Photoshop to go back in and adjust the colors a little bit, if I want to get it to look just like the original.
Right.
But maybe, you just can't sometimes.
Well, it's a little on the light side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this past weekend, I had my first workshop where we worked on craft paper. And we did tomatoes. This was my demo page from the workshop. And the students, I think, loved it. But this gave me the opportunity, you can see on the top right, to teach the idea of starting with a mid-tone, putting in your highlights, building your shadows, to understand. It lets you feel like you can understand the form in a way that's very different than on a white background. And then, working on the color on top. So that was a lot of fun to do that.
Now, to everybody that's watching, Wendy, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're stocking and selling the craft pads, correct?
I do. I sell craft paper, and I sell the Stonehenge Aqua in the blocks, but also I make custom spiral pads with Comtrack makes them for us, so that we have these removable pads of paper, which I vote, is really nice to have. Yeah.
Right. Nice.
And then, we are going to give, if you want to buy the book, we're giving, this is a discount code, which I think Michael will give all of you, but you can see it right here. This will give you a signed copy of my book with a discount. And the code is just Legion Gift 10. And you can go to my workshop, drawbotanical.com. I think Michael Mark will give you the link for that.
Right.
If you're interested in getting the book. And I think that's pretty much.
So let me throw something out at you. All right.
Sure.
Do you know? Forgive me. Do you know about our black Stonehenge Aqua?
Do I know what? Can you tell me?
Black Stonehenge Aqua.
I have not. No, I don't. Tell me something I don't know. Wow.
We've been working on it for like 3 years. It finally is. It's been available for a while. What is more available? It's coming available is going to be black hot press aqua.
So what you have to work with? What, acrylic or
wash? You can work with acrylic. You can work with wash. You can work with watercolor. Pearlescent.
And you probably color pencils.
Yeah, metallics, iridescence, pearlescence, and I'm sure that some of your images would look great and would look fabulous. I think they would. I'll have to get you some samples of it.
Okay, and I'll try it. That's exciting. Yeah, I would love to try that.
Samples might even be in that pack that I sent you. I'm not sure.
I know. I have that right here. I haven't opened it yet. Came in today's mail.
That's okay. That's okay. So do we have any more questions for Wendy?
Yes, we have a lot of questions, and I was just holding it through the presentation. So Megan asks about the font, which is a great question that you use when you're writing on your paintings. Can you talk about that?
I just make it up. I take a few fonts and I put them together. And I'm always struggling with my writing. Like, do I like it like this? Should it look this way? And it never looks quite the same twice because I don't have a font that I use. I kind of mix and match a little bit.
Amy asks, are you working from real objects or from pictures or both?
Yeah, I work from real plants most of the time. I don't like to work exclusively from photographs. I'll only do that if it's an illustration project for a client and it's the wrong season and I can't get what I have to illustrate. But it's much harder, to believe it or not, to work from a photograph for me, because there's so much information that the plant gives you that you have to figure it out from a photograph. It flattens form, it gives deceiving plant structure. And then I can always tell when somebody's done their complete piece from a photograph and not from the, you can just tell the difference.
Because of detail.
It's the detail, it's structure, it's just something about it. So
Right.
I will use photographs to help. I might start a flower and take some pictures of it, and then the flower dies, but I've got my drawing started well enough along that I can then finish it and then look at the photograph for some information if need be. But my preferred way to work is always from a real plant. Partly for selfish reasons, because I just love to be close to the plants, because I think they nurture you at the same time. And they appreciate it when you take the time to pay attention to them.
Very cool.
So we had a few questions about how often you use watercolor pencils versus regular pencils. You're mixing it on the same pieces, and tied to that, when you're using the craft paper and you have that white highlights, are you layering that? You starting with the white and then layering on top of that, specifically on the craft?
I start with, I just put white down. If it's a white flower, I'm going to put the white down first. If it's just a highlight that's white, you know, I put some of that in, and then I use colors. I typically use a neutral color pencil first to get the drawing started, and then I might just keep layering colored pencils. Maybe a layer, if it's a really bright color, I might want to put some white down and then color over it. I will sometimes also, I'll use some of the watercolor as well.
Well, like the piece behind you, Wendy, the piece behind you.
Yeah.
With the white root, part of the
Right, right. Yeah, that's got watercolor and color pencil in it. And in no particular order. I go back and forth all the time.
Right.
Gloria is asking about your lighting setup. How many lights do you use and positioning? Does it change for each one, or do you have a setup that you use for most of your drawings?
I just, for when I'm drawing, I need really good light so I can see. I prefer natural light if possible, but that's not always possible. I'm left-handed, so I need to have a light coming from the right for me to see without casting a shadow on my work. I also need to have my subject lit so I can get one view of consistent highlights and shadows on my subject that I want to draw. I don't want to have light from multiple sources. So what I've learned to do is imagine that light source. I keep it in my head. So I decide where I'm going to put the shadows and the highlight, whether or not they're really looking like that on my subject. Because I don't like to work in a dark room with my subject in a box with a light on it so I can see it exactly, if that makes sense. So I do have several different light sources and different kinds of light. I use different lamps that have sort of daylight settings, things like that, as well as just whatever light is around.
Jody asks, as a beginner, how many times did you fail before you felt like you finally got it right?
Well, to me, it's a process that I love doing, and I always loved it from the minute I started studying the techniques in a systematic way. It wasn't about ever failing and then getting it right. It was just liking the journey, if I could say. You know, I guess I like some things better than others, but I was happy right from the start with what my work started to look like, because it was so different than what my work looked like before. You know, I was completely thinking about it differently. And I was learning really simple things first, you know, just how to tone from light to dark and have it go smooth and even. Learning that was really fun to do. So I enjoyed that, even though it was just a tone bar, right? And then I kept building on that.
Henrietta asks, do you ever use pan pastels?
No. I'm worried about the dust, honestly.
And Suzanne asks, do you ever use a solvent? Why or why not?
I don't like chemicals, so I have tried solvents. I know some botanical color pencil artists and color pencil who use solvents. I don't like it. I like to keep things natural, and I don't like to smell those fumes. So I get my blending by using watercolor with the color pencil and also by burnishing with other color pencils. And burnishing is kind of pressing and blending all the colors together.
So Wendy, you don't you don't varnish or coat your pieces at all.
You know what? I don't. Probably sometimes should, but I don't.
And when you frame them, when you frame your originals,
Right.
do you use your UV glass?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I use all archival materials and UV glass. Yeah.
Right.
A few questions about some of your workshops. Question earlier was, when do you plan on resuming in-person workshops? And tied to that, do you limit the amount of students for your Zoom classes?
The answer on when I plan to resume in person, I don't know. Everyone I've had planned, including Spain in the next spring, I've canceled for now.
Really?
Yeah, and I just heard, like, I teach sometimes like the New York Botanical Garden, and they want me to teach again, like they're setting up next spring as a Zoom class. So I don't think they're planning to resume anytime soon. But I don't know yet. I can't answer. I do hope to resume in-person workshops in Hawaii in the winter. That's my goal, because I've been doing that for 12 years. And I'm hoping we can still do one there in January or February or March. So I don't know, but we'll see. I might have him here sooner. We'll see.
And the amount to your Zoom,
Yeah.
how many?
Right now, we limit the Zoom to 30 students, and I have 2 or 3 instructors with me when I teach. I have really great staff, I have to say, very talented people who help and are wonderful artists themselves and know my techniques and are able to teach. And so because of the popularity of these Zoom workshops, I've been increasing my staff. And so I have 4 people now, and I'm interviewing to get a couple more people that can help so that we can continue to increase the Zoom workshops, but not increase the amount of participants.
Right.
So that people get the individual attention.
Claire has a question. We have about 5 more minutes, so we could probably get a few more questions in here. And Michael, interrupt me at any point if you wanted to ask Wendy any direct questions.
Well, what I wanted to know from Wendy is what's next. I mean, really, I mean, how do you want to grow? Where do you want to go? What do you?
Black Stonehenge aqua paper.
Smooth, right? Well, we're going to try it. And do you use pearlescent or iridescent or metallic colors?
No.
You will try it.
Okay.
You will try it.
I could try it.
You will try it.
I honestly, who knows what's next? You know what? You know where I take my lead from?
Where?
The plants.
Really?
Yeah, the plant tells me what's next. I walk outside, I see something, I'm like, oh, I have to draw that. That's what happens.
Unbelievable. That's great.
And actually, that's a great tie into Claire's question. Since plants are constantly growing or dying, do you simply work fast, or do you somewhat rely on the knowledge of basic forms to create complete details that have changed? How do you work? Do you work quickly?
I try to work quickly. That's a relative term, something like the original on that craft paper behind me, that tulip.
Yeah.
That's probably 2 days. So maybe I can work as fast before the plant dies. I try. And then I can, things like the roots, the leaves, the stems, I can do all that later. But I try to get I do it in order of what's going to die first.
But also, Wendy, just from an aesthetic standpoint, the surface of the sheet of the paper helps you as well from a speed standpoint. It allows
Definitely. Like I said, I'm working twice as fast on the Stonehenge Aqua and the craft than I did before.
Right.
So.
Right.
But I've also learned to work fast because I teach and demonstrate so much. And I don't want my students to spend all day watching me, so I have to like get it down really quick. So I've learned to work fast. But it's still not fast relative to other kinds of art, for example.
Right. Interesting.
And as a reminder, you do sell your materials on your website, correct, Wendy?
Yeah, I have all my sort of curated art supplies that I import from quite a lot. I get from Japan. My favorite paintbrushes come from there. And then I've got the paper and the books and then the pencils and other kind of cool pencil sharpeners, other things. I only sell things that I personally use and think work really well.
And we can send out a link to that post-webinar.
Sure.
And as a final reminder, in the last minute or so, your book is available at 10% discount. Just click on the offers tab on the left and enter the discount code. And it also links over to our website where you can browse around and other products, I believe.
Wendy, I can't thank you enough for just letting us come into your studio, into your home. I mean, really. And you're so talented. And I look forward to your new pieces. I really do.
Thank you.
Really, really do.
Thank you, Michael. It's really been a pleasure to be here with you today and to get to know more about your papers and things as well. And Mark, thank you for really making this run so smoothly.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great and safe day.
Be safe. Everybody be safe.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Wendy.